If you've been doing everything right, cutting carbs, walking every morning, watching your portions, and that belly fat still isn't moving, I want you to hear this. Calories in, calories out is real. But it's not the whole story. What's living in your gut also plays a role in how your body handles blood sugar, how much inflammation it's running, and how efficiently it extracts energy from the food you eat. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 6 foods that have real research behind them for supporting gut health, blood sugar control, and modest fat loss. I'm ranking them from solid but modest to most evidence-backed, and I'm going to be straight with you about what the studies actually show, including where the evidence is strong and where it's thinner than the headlines suggest. You deserve the real picture, not a miracle pitch. Every source I mention is linked in the description, so you can check it yourself. I'm Dr. Angela Moore. Let's get into it. The real problem: visceral fat and insulin resistance. Before we get to the 6 foods, it helps to understand what's actually happening underneath that stubborn belly fat, because it changes how you think about fixing it. Visceral fat is the fat packed around your liver, pancreas, and intestines, as opposed to the fat just under your skin. And visceral fat isn't passive storage, it's metabologically active tissue. It releases inflammatory signaling molecules called adipokines around the clock. Over time, this steady drip of inflammation interferes with how your cells respond to insulin. That's called insulin resistance. Here's why that matters so much. When your cells become resistant to insulin, your pancreas compensates by producing more of it. And insulin is your body's primary fat storage signal. Higher insulin tells your fat cells to hold on to energy and makes it harder to burn fat for fuel. So you end up in a loop. More visceral fat leads to more insulin resistance, which leads to higher insulin, which leads to more fat storage. This is documented extensively in the research, and it's a big part of why some people can eat fewer calories and still struggle to lose belly fat specifically. Now, where does the gut come in? This is the part that gets oversimplified online, so let's slow down. Researchers have observed that people with obesity often show a different balance of 2 major gut bacteria groups called Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes compared to leaner individuals. The theory is that Firmicutes-dominant gut communities are more efficient at extracting calories from food and may influence fat storage signaling. This is genuinely interesting science. It's also incomplete science. Several larger, more recent studies have failed to replicate a clean, consistent ratio difference between lean and obese individuals. Many researchers in the field now think it's less about this one broad ratio and more about specific bacterial species and the metabolites they produce, especially short-chain fatty acids like butyrate that matter most for metabolic health. So here's the honest version of the story. Your gut bacteria do influence inflammation, blood sugar regulation, and how your body processes food. Specific foods can support a healthier gut environment in ways that are backed by real clinical trials. But there's no single ratio you can flip like a switch, and no food that resets your metabolism overnight. What you can do is consistently feed the kind of gut environment that's associated with better metabolic outcomes. That's what these 6 foods do, each in a different way. The 6 foods ranked number 6. Ground flaxseed, the fiber foundation. We're starting here because flaxseed is foundational, not flashy. 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed contains roughly 2 grams of plant-based omega-3 fat, called ALA, a mix of soluble and insoluble fiber, and the highest concentration of plant lignans of any common food. Lignans are compounds with mild estrogen-like activity that have been studied for their role in hormone metabolism and inflammation. Here's the mechanism. The soluble fiber in flax forms a viscous gel in your digestive tract. That gel slows how quickly glucose is absorbed into your bloodstream, which blunts the insulin spike after a meal. At the same time, that fiber becomes food for beneficial bacteria, including species like Roseburia and Blautia, which produce short-chain fatty acids linked to a healthier gut lining and better metabolic markers. Several human trials, run over 8 to 12 weeks, show modest but real improvements in waist circumference and blood lipid levels with regular flaxseed intake, on top of a normal diet. Preparation matters here, so pay attention. Grind whole flax seeds right before you use them. Whole seeds largely pass through your digestive system, undigested, so you get almost none of the benefit. Once ground, the omega-3 fats oxidize quickly, so use it within a day or 2, and keep your whole seeds refrigerated to preserve freshness. The recommendation is 1 tablespoon of ground flax daily, stirred into yogurt, oatmeal, or a smoothie. Number 5. Psyllium husk, the soluble fiber workhorse. Psyllium is almost pure soluble fiber, and it's one of the most well-studied fibers in clinical nutrition. In water, it can expand to many times its original volume, forming a thick gel that moves through your digestive tract. That gel does 2 important things. First, it binds bile acids in your gut. Because your liver has to pull cholesterol from your bloodstream to manufacture replacement bile acids, regular psyllium intake is one of the more reliably documented fiber interventions for modestly lowering LDL cholesterol. Second, it feeds bacteria that produce butyrate, the short-chain fatty acid that supports the integrity of your gut lining and has anti-inflammatory effects. To prepare it, stir 1 tablespoon into 12 ounces of water and drink it immediately, on an empty stomach, ideally first thing in the morning, at least 30 minutes before eating. Follow it with a full glass of water, because psyllium needs adequate fluid to work properly and avoid digestive discomfort. Start with just half a tablespoon for your first week. Too much too fast causes bloating and gas, not faster results, so ease into it. Look for plain, unflavored psyllium husk powder. Check the label closely, because many flavored or pre-mixed versions add sugar or artificial sweeteners that work against what you're trying to do. Number 4. Apple cider vinegar, the modest blood sugar helper. Apple cider vinegar gets a lot of hype, so let's be precise about what it actually does. The active compound is acetic acid. Several small, randomized human trials have shown that taking vinegar before a carbohydrate-heavy meal can modestly blunt the blood sugar spike that follows. A few longer trials, including some in adults with obesity, report small reductions in body weight or waist circumference over a period of months. That's a real, measurable effect, but it is a small one. Vinegar is not equivalent to a metabolic medication, and the body of large-scale, rigorous trials is still limited. Be skeptical of anyone claiming dramatic visceral fat loss from vinegar alone. To take it, mix 1 tablespoon of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, the kind with the cloudy sediment called the mother, into 8 ounces of water. Drink it through a straw, 15 to 20 minutes before your first meal. The straw matters, because undiluted frequent vinegar exposure can erode tooth enamel over time. Start with just 1 teaspoon for your first week, since it can cause stomach upset at higher doses, especially before eating. A widely available option is Bragg Organic Raw Apple Cider Vinegar, though any raw unfiltered brand will work. Number 3. Ceylon cinnamon, the blood sugar modulator. This is where things get more compelling. The active compound in cinnamon, cinnamaldehyde, has been shown in animal studies and some smaller human studies to shift the composition of gut bacteria, reducing certain less favorable strains, while supporting beneficial ones like lactobacillus. Several clinical trials in people with metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes report meaningful reductions in fasting blood sugar after regular cinnamon use over 8 to 12 weeks. I want to be fair to the science here. Results vary quite a bit from study to study, and not every trial finds a significant effect, which tells us individual response probably varies. But the trials that do find an effect are notable, with cinnamon appearing to partly mimic insulin's action in helping cells take up glucose from the blood. Here's the part that genuinely matters for your health, not just your results. Use Ceylon cinnamon, scientifically called Cinnamomum verum, not the common cassia cinnamon found in most grocery store spice jars. Cassia contains much higher levels of a compound called coumarin, which at regular daily doses over time has been linked to liver stress. Ceylon cinnamon contains only trace amounts. Check the label, or look for Ceylon specifically, because most bulk cinnamon sold in the US is cassia by default. The dose is about 1 level teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon, stirred into warm water, tea, or coffee, daily. Number 2. Ginger, the digestive and metabolic booster. Ginger has one of the stronger bodies of evidence on this list, partly because it's been studied so widely. A meta-analysis pooling multiple randomized trials found that ginger supplementation was associated with measurable reductions in body weight, waist-to-hip ratio, and fasting blood sugar across study populations. Beyond blood sugar, ginger speeds up gastric emptying, meaning food moves through your stomach more efficiently, which can reduce bloating and excess fermentation in the gut. It may also produce a small thermogenic effect, a modest, temporary increase in calorie burning after a meal. I'll note that some of the specific calorie numbers you'll see floating around online overstate what the underlying studies actually measured, so take exact figures with a grain of salt. The directional effect, though, is fairly consistent across the research. For preparation, use fresh ginger root rather than powder, since fresh ginger retains more of the active gingerol compounds. Peel and grate about 1 tablespoon, steep it in hot water for 5 to 7 minutes, and drink it, ideally on an empty stomach. Fresh ginger keeps well in the freezer, and you can grate it directly while frozen, which makes this an easy daily habit. Number 1. Turmeric with black pepper, the inflammation target. We're ending here because this pair addresses the root mechanism we talked about earlier, inflammation. Curcumin, the main active compound in turmeric, inhibits a signaling pathway called NF-kappa B, which is one of the primary drivers of inflammatory activity in the body, including the inflammation generated directly by visceral fat tissue. This is significant because, remember, that inflammation is part of what drives insulin resistance in the first place. Multiple meta-analyses, pooling dozens of trials, show that curcumin supplementation modestly improves fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C, a marker of average blood sugar over time, and HOMA-IR, a standard measure of insulin resistance, particularly in people with metabolic syndrome or prediabetes. Here's the catch that most people miss. Curcumin on its own is very poorly absorbed by the body. Most of it passes through unused. This is why pairing is essential, not optional. Combine turmeric with black pepper. The active compound in black pepper, piperine, has been shown to increase curcumin absorption significantly, by a wide margin in human trials, including a source of healthy fat in the same meal, like olive oil or nut butter. Since curcumin is fat-soluble and absorbed alongside dietary fat, the dose is about 1 teaspoon of turmeric with a pinch of black pepper, daily, ideally taken with a meal that includes some fat. A realistic morning protocol. Now let's talk about how to actually put this together, because trying to add all 6 at once is a mistake. Your gut needs time to adjust, and so does your routine. In week 1, start with flaxseed plus apple cider vinegar. These are the gentlest on your system and easiest to build into an existing breakfast. In week 2, add psyllium husk plus Ceylon cinnamon. By now your gut has had time to adapt to the increased fiber load. From week 3 onward, add ginger tea plus turmeric with black pepper. At this point you're running the full protocol. If you want to track whether it's working, I'd suggest weekly waist circumference measurements, taken at the same time of day, around your belly button, rather than relying on the scale alone. Visceral fat changes don't always show up as dramatic weight loss right away, especially in the first month. So the tape measure tends to be a more honest and more motivating signal than the scale. A few honest notes. Don't take apple cider vinegar and psyllium at the exact same time. Space them apart by at least an hour or 2, since both affect digestion and nutrient absorption, and taking them together can blunt the benefit of each. Be patient. These are gradual, supportive interventions, not fast fixes. A realistic timeline for noticeable change is measured in months, not days. And that's consistent with how the clinical trials are actually designed. Most run 8 to 12 weeks at minimum before seeing meaningful results. If you're on blood sugar or blood pressure medication, talk to your doctor before adding several of these at once. Cinnamon, apple cider vinegar, and high fiber intake can all interact with how those medications are absorbed or how well they work. And your doctor needs to know what you're adding to your routine. Take care of yourself. This is Wellness Food Blog.